The Lord be with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks unto the Lord our God. It is very meet, right, and our bounden duty that we should at all times and in all places give thanks unto thee, O Lord, Holy Father, Almighty, everlasting God, through Jesus Christ, thine only Son, our Lord, who hast at this time consecrated thy servant Charles to be our King, that by the anointing of thy grace he may be the defender of thy faith and the protector of thy people, that with him we may learn the ways of service, compassion, and love, and that the good work that thou hast begun in him this day may be brought to completion in the day of Jesus Christ. Therefore, with angels and archangels, and with all the company of heaven, we laud and magnify thy glorious name, evermore praising thee and saying,
you're watching the coronation of King Charles III, and of course the oath of the coronation has been taken by the King with a rendition of songs and of course some other rituals which has just been done moments ago. And of course we have Arise special correspondent Sheito Atigari who joins us from Westminster Abbey, and of course Judita Da Silva as well, where this coronation ceremony is already underway. Sheita, I'm going to start with you. It's been 1953 when the Queen was crowned Queen of England. What is the significance of this for King Charles III? It's been 70 years up till this moment.
I mean, first off, it is important to notice that to say at this moment that King Charles III has been officially crowned and anointed as king, and even Queen Consort Camilla, that's what she was referred to up until this moment, is now officially the Queen of England. But let's talk about the significance of today. Now, we do know that even though today is the coronation, King Charles III had stepped into his role as the British monarch when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, passed away back in September. Now, highlights of today are really just to really showcase the fact that he is now stepping into his role as the head of state and the titular role as the leader of the church. Now, we're also looking at the fact that the Archbishop of Canterbury has today anointed King Charles III. He also gave him the traditional symbols of the monarchy, which is the orb and the scepter. He was anointed, and the crown of King Edward at the time was now placed on his head for the first time, and he was crowned alongside Queen Camilla. It's very important to note that he's now fully stepping into his role as king, and it's official now. He is the King of England.
All right, Judita, let's come to you. If this has been 20 years in the making, talking about Operation Golden Orb, we've been hearing that this procession and the entire coronation has been in the works. The planning has been in the work for more than 20 years. Talk to us. Were they able to pull off a seamless event so far?
They have done the job and they've delivered, because when you think about all the moving pieces and the significance of every item, every piece of regalia, every member in the procession, everyone that's in Westminster Abbey, they know that they represent a thread throughout history. The Archbishop of Canterbury, within British history, he is the highest ranking person in Britain after the princes and princes of royal blood. That's why he can be the only one to officiate this ceremony. the robes, the orb, the scepter, the sword, everything had to be in the right place at the right time, be reconfigured based on the controversies that have preceded. So when you think that they've been planning it for 2 decades, they've also had to constantly adapt the plans as things have shifted in society along the way. And everyone has to be moving on the same page and in the same direction for what we're seeing right now to happen in the way it has.
All right, very good. Now, Sheyi, Prince William is thought to have had a major role in the coronation. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh yes, you're definitely right. Prince William is set to pledge allegiance to the king. It's something that is called the Pledge of Loyalty. Now what happens is, now remember, if we're looking at the lineage of the royal family from King Charles III, it is going to go to Prince William. So what in fact this is he's pledging his allegiance. He will kiss his father on the right cheek and kneel before him. Of course, this in itself will be an emotional moment for Prince William, because this is him looking towards his future, because he one day is going to become the King of England. So at this point, it is a full circle moment, watching his father being crowned as king and pledging, the only one, of course, pledging his allegiance. It's a very important family dynamic between the two of them. And of course, very important to note is even the future king, but right now Prince George is also in attendance. When the king was coming in, you could see him right behind his grandfather. I'm not sure he could fully comprehend what's going on right now, but this is a peek into his future as well.
All right, Judith, let's talk about the entire ceremony. We know we had a massive security scare some few days ago at the Buckingham Palace, where a man who actually threw shotgun shells into the Buckingham Palace. They found him with a piece of knife. But talk to us about the security operation for this event. How has it been? How Herculean has it been policing this particular event?
I mean, they've deployed 11,500 metropolitan officers to guard this event, and it will continue through the whole of the coronation weekend. And when you look at how quickly and decisively they handled that security scare when the gunshots were thrown into Buckingham Palace grounds, that shows that they are expecting the worst, hoping for the best, but prepared for anything. That is their job. The head of the Metropolitan Police said that this is the hardest job they've had to do in 70 years. But they recognize that it has to be done without fault and without failure. They are protecting both the sovereign as well as world leaders and members of the Commonwealth countries around the world. What they do now will define the opinion the world has of them going forward. So they've pretty much done exactly, on the back of Queen Elizabeth's funeral, they've done exactly what they were assigned to do. So definitely it's an applaud to them.
Now, Sheyi, the head of the UK's main Republican group and other activists have been arrested at a coronation protest in London. This comes after the cabinet minister insisted people will still have the liberty to protest. Why do you think that is?
You know, Nii, when the news broke that the head of the anti-monarchy, the Republican Party, of course, had been picked up, had been arrested, and other protesters had been arrested, it did come as quite a shock to many onlookers because of this same reason that you've just given, that they were going to be given the liberty to protest. Now, let's not forget that these anti-protest laws were fast-tracked, in legislature, and what we're looking at is a 12-month sentence for those who would be blocking the roads leading to the coronation or surrounding the coronation to some extent, and of course a 6 months behind bars, or an unlimited fine if you are chained to an object or a person or found to be disrupting the peace. And then as well, police officers have also been given the liberty to stop and search persons who they believe have the intention to disrupt the coronation. So at this point, you look at it as, why are these people being picked up if they are protesting peacefully. It does speak to the level of democracy that is being shown today. But as it stands, it's still, because the coronation is still going on, we are not up to date as to exactly what is going to happen to the leader of the party and also the rest of the protesters who were arrested today by just, trying to protest their rights, not wanting King Charles III as their king.
All right, Juditha, I would like to find out from you. Talk to me about one man, because we know that over 2,000 VIP guests flew in for this particular coronation. But one stands out amongst others. Talking about William. There are talks that he might leave immediately to join his son, who is celebrating his 4th birthday today. Some are saying that he might stay back and actually have a little family bonding. Talk to us. What more do we know about the itinerary of William during and after this particular coronation?
When you see all the parts that the members of the royal family have played during this event, you'll begin to see the architecture that King Charles III is setting up for who will be the working royals during his reign. Prince William is the heir apparent. So what you're seeing is similar to what Queen Elizabeth did as she was getting older and deferring duties and divvying them up between her descendants. That's what King Charles is doing. William is going to be probably visiting a lot of the events in recognition of the efforts of a lot of the people around the country who just want to celebrate the day with King Charles and with the royal family. He will attend with people who've attended, officials, senior representatives from countries around the country, and also at the coronation concert. These duties will be shared between him and Kate. There will also be appearances from Prince George, who in turn will be king one day, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. That's what the duties are going to be going forward. That which the king cannot do, Prince William will do, because in turn, when he takes the throne, he'll pass on those duties and divvy them up between what is currently the page boys, Prince George and his cousins.
Juditha, I think I actually mixed it up. I was referring to the Duke of Sussex, talking about Prince Harry there, because there's been a lot of media talk about his attendance and the role he will play, and after.
Okay, this is a more controversial one. So we know that Prince Harry is doing a very quick turnaround because he wants to get back to his home in Montecito for the end of today and celebrate Prince Archie's birthday. But as far as his role going forward, what Prince Harry faces is a very dicey future, because the window of opportunity he has to build bridges and mend fences lies under the reign of King Charles III. He is a father of 2 warring sons, and if Harry doesn't fix this issue, because remember, what he did with the interview with Oprah, with this book Spare, and with the Netflix series, was point aim at Prince William, at Kate, and their ability to protect their children. What you did was challenge William as a man, but he also capitalized on their code of don't complain, don't explain. So William nurses a wound that has no avenue for healing and had to bear that at the hand of his brother. He probably will not hold out the olive branch, but the key is this: if they don't fix it, because I believe that King Charles, wanting Harry and Meghan to attend, wants a healing in the family. When he dies and William becomes king, too much time will have passed. And what Harry would have done is given William enough time to heal and establish a life without him in it. And you cannot build bridges at that point. So this reign of King Charles III, as far as the House of Windsor goes, is very important, particularly for Prince Harry, because now he's a celebrity in America, but his only worth is his connection to the royal family. Break that link, and he's in a whole new sphere of life that is completely alien to him, having grown up within the firm for his entire life and up until now.
Indeed, Juditha Silva and of course Sheita Tigari would like to thank you for the update for now. Hopefully we'll link up back with you in the course of the ceremony. We'll now go back live to Westminster Abbey, where the coronation of King Charles is currently taking place. right, you're still watching the coronation of King Charles there, and of course we've gone through the process. The king has been administered the oath, and of course he's been sworn in. The same thing with his wife, Queen Camilla, as of now. So, Shaitan, walk us through what we've just witnessed so far at Westminster Abbey.
Thank you so much, Nii. What we're seeing now is King Charles III making his way out of Westminster Abbey as guests in the cathedral are singing the UK's national anthem, God Save the King. And if you can hear behind me, the bells are ringing. It is a day of celebration. The coronation has come, and we're finally seeing King Charles III coronated as the King of England. The King and Queen will now lead another procession in their horse-driven carriage and greet people before they return to Buckingham Palace. The royal couple will also make an appearance on the palace's balcony. Now, as you can imagine, this is a day where a lot of Britons have come out, even if it's just to get a glimpse of the new King and the new Queen as they make their way from Westminster Abbey back to Buckingham Palace.
All right, making their way back. Of course, the bells are still chiming very, very hard. Sheito, now the procession is gone. What should we expect? You've spoken about the procession back to the Buckingham Palace, but what are the next series of events we are to expect in this very, very auspicious day?
Definitely, Aaron. It is an auspicious day. And like I said earlier, because this is done now, they're going to make their way back to Buckingham Palace. And they're also going to, show themselves to the people at the palace as well. But what's more important to note is that the celebration doesn't end here. Tomorrow is the coronation concert, May 7th. It's also going to be happening on the grounds of Windsor. And we're going to be seeing a lot of global acts, a lot of international acts that will be making their way down to this auspicious event. We're going to be seeing performances by Lionel Richie, performances by Nicole Scherzinger from the Pussycat Dolls, Olly Murs, and like I mentioned yesterday, Tiwa Savage, of course, will be there performing for the King and the Queen of England. So it doesn't end here. Tomorrow also sees a coronation concert, which in itself is a celebration or an culmination of everything that has happened up until this moment. About 10,000 people are expected to be in attendance, and those tickets were giving out across different zones in the UK. So it was something that had been given out way ahead of time to make sure that each part of England is well represented at the coronation concert tomorrow.
Very good, Sheito. Now, this is the first time members of the public are invited to pledge their allegiance to the King. They are calling it a chorus of millions. And of course, female clergy and other religious leaders from other faiths have also took an active part in the procession. This is a departure, obviously, from tradition. How are people taking these new changes in tradition, as it were?
Well, as you know, even King Charles had already made an announcement to slim down his monarchy. And to agree with what you said, in nod to the change in the religious makeup of the United Kingdom, we're seeing different religions here being represented, talking about, Buddhist, Jewish religion, Muslim and Sikh religious leaders will have played an important role in this coronation. And when it comes to pledging allegiance in itself, there has been mixed reactions. People saying that they didn't want to do that, and some, of course, going ahead without any holdback whatsoever. But what we are seeing, especially during the coronation, was the full room pledging allegiance to the King. And of course, when he was making his way out, they kept referring to him as the new King of England and singing God Save the King. So regardless of what the public opinion is right now, what we saw happen was a full-blown out coronation and an allegiance to the King by everyone who was in attendance. There is the group anti-monarchists who have, of course, come out to say that they don't want King Charles to be their king, but they were only allowed to protest and not necessarily get into Buckingham Palace.
All right, Shaitan, talk to us. You're on ground there. This is the first time we're witnessing a full-fledged coronation globally. The last time out in the 50s, it was just...
I'd have to cut this interview short.
All right, Junkim. I was just trying to establish that this is the first full-fledged coronation we are witnessing globally. The last time out, it was just shown to the UK audience. India millions actually watched it. Then it was probably transported to the US and Canada to be televised at a later time. But this is the first time a global audience actually viewing in and tuning in to watch the coronation of royalty in the United Kingdom.
Which also gives credence to the significance of this event. Remember, this is a one-off scenario. It's 70 years. The last one was in 1953 by Queen, the King's mother, Elizabeth. Of course, the second. And of course, we saw how that played out, and a lot has changed since then. Well, he had to wait, of course, with the transition of his mother, the late Queen, to have his chance. And so, to a large extent, with technology, comes that global audience appeal.
Because one of those, speaking about technology, that particular carriage you're seeing there, it actually has been retrofitted with a camera on top of it, so that the royal family can actually capture this moment and also savor it for life. So they've tweaked some traditions that they can't tweak because some of them are set in stone. Because, for example, the ones that were tweaked, we hear that this man is a huge animal rights activist talking about King Charles III, and he decided that he was not going to use animal oil for his anointing, that he was going to use olive oil pressed from Jerusalem, freshly pressed from Jerusalem for his anointing. So those are the little embellishments he could bring in to try to modernize this whole, or rather trying to modernize the monarchy, because people have been asking questions. What is the role of the monarchy in the 21st century? And he would have to do a lot to ensure that the transition is smooth and legacies are preserved and the monarchy does not look antiquated. They do not look like they are out of touch with reality. Because a lot of people are still questioning, should we be having a monarchy in the 21st century, thanks to the influence of democracy and the likes.
And also to add to that, just like you said, all right, we have Judita De Silva is with us in our London studio to give us more insight. Judita, it's good to have you again. Now, let's take a look at the coronation so far. Based on reactions regarding Camilla's title, there's been some mixed reactions towards, transiting from Queen Consort to actual Queen being suggested by, well, it's no longer a suggestion, it's now what we have as Queen Camilla. So what are people's reaction to that so far, now that it's been signed, sealed, and delivered?
All right,
hopefully we'll.
It's just the way things are. So as far as the title she has now, it's a question of acceptance, because it is the reality for Great Britain. And probably one of the most awkward points, if you know the politics behind the scenes, was when she was taking the oath and being crowned, because just meters away was Prince Harry, and we know the opinions he had of that moment coming into reality, which he put in the pages of his book Spare. So that is probably a moment that was tinged with pain, with sadness on both sides. But at the end of the day, as they say, what will be, and it is as it is right now.
All right, let's cross over to the Trafalgar Square, where we have our ICE correspondents. Faith, I want to say thank you for joining us today on this very, very special occasion and our special coverage of the coronation of King Charles III. Faith, talk to us We hear that based on criticism, the homage of the people has been toned down. But is that reflective of the number of people that have turned up at the Trafalgar Square to celebrate the ascension of King Charles?
Trafalgar Square is absolutely full of people, as is the entire procession route. People have been turning out in droves to witness this monumentally historic day. The procession route was closed to public access by 8 a.m. because it was full. Then after that, Green Park was closed because and that only left Hyde Park as a viewing point. Now, it hasn't all been positive. As you were saying there has been some criticism. Behind me in Trafalgar Square, there is a group of anti-monarchist protesters. Now, they are called Republican. Several of their members were arrested this morning. They've got these yellow placards which read, "Not My King." Hundreds of those were confiscated by the police, which has been cracking down. Now, the group that are behind me in Trafalgar Square have been allowed to protest throughout the day, and they will routinely, regularly chant, "Not My King." The procession is passing at the moment, and there are these conflicting, you hear the royal fans cheering, and then you'll hear "Not My King" being chanted. So certainly more than one view on show today here in Trafalgar Square.
That Judita is on with us now. Judita, it's good to have you again. Let's take a look at the role of these ornaments, of course, the orbs, the scepter, being played here, of course, the traditional essence of these ornaments, as it were. Now, countries like South Africa, claim that one of their value gems, a big diamond, is being used in this ceremony as well, and they want it back. We have countries like India as well, yes, saying some of the ornaments being used by the crown of the late Queen Elizabeth as well belong to them. When you have agitations like this, what's the scenario like? And what does it say of the past? The history of the monarchy when it comes to its colonies, its former colonies, as it were?
It's all about symbolism, and the power of symbolism is sutured through the entire coronation. And therefore, you have to be aware of what that is symbolic of to the people who are the victims of what is being presented as so glorious for Britain. Where you've talked about the orb, which has the cross above it, that represents the world of Christianity. In the scepter, at the top of the scepter, what you have is Cullinan 1. The Cullinan stone was one of the largest diamonds ever found in South Africa, and Edward VII asked the Royal Asher Diamond Company, Joseph Asher in particular, to cleave it into 9 large stones and 96 smaller ones, which were given back to the Asher family as payment. Cullinan 1 sits at the head of the scepter, and it's called the Star of Africa. That kind of symbolism is what is a dagger in the heart of Africans who believe something so representative of the marvels and treasures of their country should not be used as a decoration for someone whose endeavors of empire caused our country so much pain. In a process, in an event that's rich in symbolism, those symbols must be aware of how they resonate with the peoples who are meant to be the friends of the United Kingdom all around the world. In the crown that sits on Camilla's head, you have more of the Cullinan stones, which were cleaved by Joseph Asher. The colonial diamond, which civil rights groups in India asked for to be returned, it was ruled in India by the Supreme Court that it was given as a gift to Queen Victoria. That's why they didn't return it, but they replaced it with something else because they knew it's too much to have something that contentious being part of the optics of this event. So as far as attitudes go, you can say that as they see this, peoples in Africa might not feel as warm or as celebratory as those in Britain. But at the end of the day, tradition is tradition. And as in wars, in conquest, in victory, there are those who enjoy the spoils of war and the victims who bear the wounds of tragedy.
All right, I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people have spoken about the fact that the United Kingdom are transitioning from being an empire into the Commonwealth of Nations. And right now, King Charles III is the leader of the Commonwealth of Nations as against being the king of the British Empire. That particular transition, how does he ensure that it is seamless and it is very timely? I was speaking with Nii, and we're speaking about the fact that a transition has to happen. How does King Charles ensure that the monarchy moves into the 21st century?
It's fascinating to think that it was just his mother who swore allegiance to the Commonwealth, and she held it as one of the most precious responsibilities she had as the sovereign of this nation. And the kinds of navigation, because remember that it's a constitutional monarchy, the king doesn't have absolute, or queen doesn't have absolute power. When they exert influence, it has to be done in a very passive way, in a very pastoral way, where you make people aware of your sentiment, but impose no dominion. That's what Queen Elizabeth II was excellent at. She did it when Ghana wanted to break free, and she managed to navigate their way back to staying within the Commonwealth. What King Charles has to do now is realize those generations who were willing to accommodate or capitulate to the desire of the British people, the British country, to hold on to the image of empire, they're getting old, they're dying out. The generations who are assuming the driving seats of society and culture will not back down. So what he needs to do and what he needs to start and pass on to Prince William is an understanding of how to engage with people as equals, but make them see the benefit of operating as a union. That will be the new face of the Commonwealth if he's capable of doing so. But that will take accountability from the United Kingdom for what they did, what they benefited from, and who suffered for it.
Very good, Faith Orr is still with us in Trafalgar Square and still talking about the issues of the Commonwealth. Faith, there are agitations within the Commonwealth right now for countries still tied to the suzerainty of the monarchy to become independent republics. So it is gaining tractions since the emergence of King Charles when he ascended the throne. Given what you've seen so far, will he yield to their demands to become independent republics?
I actually think it's less of a question of him yielding to their demands and the people, or compared to the people of those countries, deciding what they want. You know, we are in 2023, countries can hold referendums and make their own decisions. I don't think the monarchy in the UK would be in any position to stop countries who wanted to leave the Commonwealth or remove him as head of state. Having said that, we are seeing people from all over the world coming here to London for today's event. I have spoken to people from the United States, from Pakistan, from Malaysia, from Australia, who have all travelled to the UK just to be here for the coronation. It is certainly having a global impact. Whether it will help quash or put down any of those calls for independence, we will have to wait and see. But it is interesting when you look at the world leaders who have attended. Yesterday we did see the Commonwealth Summit being held. Of course, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari taking part in that. So there is that element of soft power to these proceedings as well, that we're seeing these world leaders from all over coming to the UK and holding these important meetings. I mean, even the Emir of Qatar was meeting with Rishi Sunak. So it really is just all of the nations of the world that are being invited here and involved in things. So it's an opportunity for the British government and the British monarchy to shore up these ties. But as I said, people from all over the world coming to London for today's event, and we're seeing people filing out here from Trafalgar Square. The procession has passed. The King and Queen have now passed this area on their way back to Buckingham Palace, where they are expected to be on the balcony, and we'll see a fly past later on.
All right, Juditha, let's come back to you. Speaking about this particular, as we're watching the procession back to the Buckingham Palace, a lot of people have questioned the cost of having this event take place. It's very symbolic, but it is costing the government hundreds of millions of pounds to put up this event. And they say with the UK in the middle of a cost of living crisis, isn't this event too expensive for the UK at the expense of the people, that money might have served a better purpose in terms of humanitarian endeavor as against what we're seeing playing out today?
See, this is where almost the duality and the dichotomy of governing or ruling a country like Great Britain is so confusing but so fascinating. A lot of people complain about the expense, which is rumored to be about £250 million, but it's a lot less expensive than what he could have been in the efforts of King Charles III to scale back with this coronation. Had he not held it, that would be a problem. It's a break in tradition and a chasm you create in a history that goes all the way back to 1066 and William the Conqueror. What makes Britain great is what we're witnessing right now. So you have the royal family and the House of Windsor having to understand what to do in the interest of the people, even though they don't realize it, because the eyes of the world are watching. The way they see King Charles, the way they see the royal family, and indeed by proxy how they see Britain, is a manifestation of what you can do. When you see the marches and parades of prowess in China, in Russia, in North Korea, that is a message being sent to the world. King Charles has a duty to understand the message he must send to the world on behalf of Britain. It invokes respect, it invokes a kind of reverence and a fear and understanding that the might of Great Britain is truly great. The expense comes with it. And then he has to navigate the politics of the people in justifying that expense. But trust me, in the fullness of time, when they look back on history, they will cherish that this happened, even though it cost a lot of money.
Very good, Juditha. Now, Faith, a key theme of the coronation for King Charles is service. And in his first prayer, he said, "I come not to be served, but to serve." So what are people's expectations regarding this?
I think that very much depends on who you speak to. Some people are very invested in the monarchy. We're seeing people around us here in Trafalgar Square who are wearing full Union Jack out, and they very much a monarchy to work for them. They see the tradition in it, they see that it attracts tourism, they see that it helps the economy. That is what they see, and that how they believe the monarchy should be going forward. Now, Charles didn't just adhere to the traditional element of the ceremony, where he would normally be pledged to be the defender of the faith. He wanted to modernize this ceremony and pledged to be the defender of all faiths. And I think that was an important distinction, because of course Britain is so much more multicultural than it was when Queen Elizabeth II was crowned. It's been 7 years, the country has changed to many people. Now, that's one of the elements that he wanted to incorporate, because it's not the same country, and he wanted to reflect that. So that is one of the things that people will be expecting. But others are saying that this is ridiculous, simply to million pounds for an event when the country is in a cost of living crisis. I spoke to a man earlier who said we should be funding nurses. Nurses have been on strike. We should be giving them the money, not this sort of event. You know, when you say what do people expect in their service from him, that really is a huge breadth. Many people simply don't want the monarchy to exist at all. I think it's also interesting in the regional variation of that. I've spent the past few weeks up in Scotland, where I have to say, people just don't really care that this is happening. They're not particularly against it. They just don't care. They're just not invested in it. I saw a photo from Princess Street Gardens in Edinburgh, the Scottish capital, earlier, where they had set up a stand and a big screen. They had expected a crowd to come and celebrate the coronation, and that simply didn't happen. I think about 12 people showed up to that. So it really depends on who you speak to, which part of the country, and what they expect from the monarchy here in the UK.
All right, Judith, if you can hear me, we are witnessing tradition on full display. And once again, people have actually made mention. I don't know if it's still raining where you are, but talk to us about this. We had downpours earlier in the day during King Charles's parade, as thousands actually lined up the streets of London. But more importantly was the fact that when you look at the last 4 coronations days, there were rains. The last being June of 1953, when Queen Elizabeth II was having a coronation. Rains also came down in heavy fashion. Talk to us about the rains and coronation. Is it just mere coincidence, or is it more of God blessing the event, so to speak, as some would have it?
As many an English poets would describe it, it's called pathetic fallacy, when the sentiments of human beings are translated into the elements of nature. Many people have said that it wouldn't be England if it didn't rain. This is the most important part of British history, so of course the weather would want to participate. So people don't really feel, oh no, it's raining. They have more of a sentiment of, that's good old England. So the spirit is still there, the excitement is still there. Everyone came equipped with macs and umbrellas, and they're there for the ceremony. On the Platinum Jubilee, it was pretty much a washout. But the British people showed up and they celebrated the Queen. The British people have shown up again to celebrate the new king. Whether it rains or it doesn't, they'll be there because they know that everything is coming together to be a true representation of England, even the clouds filled with rainy weather.
Faith, if you're still there, can you tell us the significance of the fly past? Hopefully we'll be able to see some vintage World War II aircraft like the Lancaster, Spitfires, and of course the Hurricane. So, you know, what's the duration and what are people looking towards that?
Expect that to happen in around an hour. Of course, as you mentioned there with the rain, that is weather dependent, so we'll see what happens with that. But it is an integral part of royal events here in Britain. We see the family gathering on the balcony and the fly past. It's one of those things that growing up in the UK you just expect to see. It just becomes part and parcel of the culture. It's not just for coronations, it's for weddings, jubilees, lots of events we see the fly past. And it's not even just royal events that you'll see a fly past for. If you have air shows, different events here in the UK, sometimes to do with the government or local government, you will see fly past. It's the Royal Air Force that carry these out, very traditional aspect of British celebrations here. So we are hoping to see that later. As I said, the family will be on the balcony for when that happens. The crowds will be allowed to surge forward at Buckingham Palace for that part of the day. At the moment they're being held back by lots of barriers, and the area in front of the palace is kept clear except for media. Those barriers will be removed. The crowds will be allowed to go forward much closer to the palace so that the family can come onto the balcony and wave to the people, essentially. That's what that's for. It's for the King and Queen to greet the public. And as I said, a fly past is an integral part of that part of the event.
All right, let's turn our attentions back to Judith. Judith, the Ministry of Defense in the UK has actually put out a certain set of numbers. They say for the 1.42 miles the king is supposed to pass through from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace. They said 19 military bands, 33 Commonwealth countries represented, 250 horses, 4,000 armed force personnel. The largest military procession for 70 years is actually being witnessed as we speak. And it's about the grandiose, it's about the pageantry, so to speak. Talk to us as we are getting into the Buckingham Palace right now. Talk to us about this particular beauty. Why is it that, what's the symbolism of having the military preside over several of these outings as it is?
It's the partnership that has always existed between the royal family and the armed forces. It's a rite of passage that every male member, soon to be female members perhaps, must join the armed forces. We know that the late Prince Philip was a very staunch supporter of the Navy, former as a Navy member himself. From Prince Charles, now King Charles, to Andrew, to Edward, to Prince Harry and William, they've all been in the armed forces, and it's something they're very proud of. So when any affair of state happens, they are flanked by the representatives, the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the police, because that's part of the protection of a nation and the pride of the nation. So like they say, it trickles down from the top. And when you're looking at the pageantry of this, from the Gold State Coach to the Diamond Jubilee Coach, you're seeing them flanked by household cavalry, yeomen of the guard, the postilions. This is something that shows unity on every level. The firm is protected and propelled and looked after by armed force members, whether they're active or retired. That's the narrative of this institution. So that's why their presence is always keenly felt and so proudly presented to the entire world.
Indeed, Judita, and of course we can see just about now the family procession heading back into Buckingham Palace. And of course, Faith Orr is still with us. Faith, it is said that the monarchy is at a time of transition. And of course, the long reign of Queen Elizabeth II had significant family turmoil. So in this regard, how popular do you think the monarchy will be under the new king?
I think, when you said there was a long reign of Queen Elizabeth. Now, many people that you speak to really loved her. They were very invested in the monarchy when she was alive, and that is fading somewhat with the new king, but there's so many crowds turned out from here today, so many people coming from all over the world, that there is still a love for the monarchy in this country, although of course we're seeing protesters as well. Now, I was speaking to one group of people earlier who travelled to London for today's event, and they had actually met in the queue when the Queen died to file past her lying in state. So that group of people had kept in touch. They had been strangers. They met in that queue and they kept in touch, and they came back to London today for this event. We've seen people camped out. Some people have been staying on the streets since Monday. So there is this bit of a divide in this country. There are some people who are really interested in the monarchy, who just, they love the monarchy, they're very popular among certain sectors and then very much less so amongst others. So there is that divide. The popularity is definitely waning compared to what we've seen in previous years, but it's still, there's very few calls for a referendum to abolish the monarchy, for instance. You do see these groups that call for it, but that isn't a sort of overwhelming public feeling. Mostly the people who aren't in love with the monarchy simply don't care that much about today's events. They don't, they're not invested one way or the other. I spoke to one taxi driver when I arrived yesterday who simply said he was looking forward to having a day off because, of course, all of the roads are closed. He wouldn't be able to do his job today. So that was what he was looking forward to. So it's not so much that there's the hugely popular or hugely unpopular. It's just in certain divisions of society, I think, is how it's split.
All right, Judita, let's talk about the newly coronated Queen Camilla. She's had to shed a lot of image, and she's had to do so much to evolve over the years, because a lot of people in the UK had a divided opinion about her, and some blamed her for the collapse of the marriage between King Charles right now and the late Princess Diana. Talk to us about Queen Camilla. Do you think that she's fully earned a place right now in the British monarchy as the Queen of England?
As far as earning it, no one can dispute that she stayed the course. As far as the public opinion goes, when they say time heals all wounds, that is true to an extent. But this event kind of reopens an old wound. But then when you look at what Camilla has done, is she's understood the assignment. Once that break in her marriage and the former Prince Charles's marriage to Princess Diana happened to effect for his love for her, she was committed to something and she had to stay with it. Public opinion has been voraciously cruel to her. But what they've seen is she's remained silent. She's followed the code of don't complain, don't explain. You don't hear stories of people trying to mend Camilla's reputation in public. She's just let time pass and hoped that when they see her dedication to King Charles, they will know that what they had is true and it's deserved, that she be recognized. That happened when we know the issues with divorce around the royal family, and to even marrying divorcees at the royal family, from Meghan Markle to Wallis Simpson, and then Camilla Parker Bowles as she then was. But Queen Elizabeth II recognized she's done the job. She followed the code and she stayed true to her son, and she allowed them to get married in Windsor Chapel, where before she passed away, she gave her the title of Queen Consort. That was the Queen on her way out saying, embrace her because I give her sanction in my position as sovereign. Now King Charles has the position to truly recognize her for the dedication she's shown him for so many years, even in the face of such vitriol from the people that he represents and presides over. So will opinions change eventually? If they haven't changed by now, they probably never will. But like I said before, she won't be liked, but it is possible in the fullness of time and with the narrative of this era in English history, she will be respected.
Very good, Judita. Now, Faith, the wealth of the royal family at a time of cost of living pressures is a factor that has divided some sections of the British public so far. What more are you hearing regarding agitations and concerns on that perspective?
People are using food banks here in the UK while a lot of public money is spent on today's events, and there are lots of people hugely unhappy about that side of things. When it comes to the family's wealth, I mean, there's, Bond Street, just near where I'm standing, just a little bit further up into central London, and huge areas of that owned by the Crown Estate, including, for instance, the large Apple store. They make more money from that than they make from many other elements of the Crown Estate. There's also what Prince William, the Prince of Wales, now has. It's the Duchy of Cornwall. So, for instance, any fish that lands there, any shellfish, lobsters, crab, he gets a percentage of all of that. And people there are very unhappy about that. Fishermen are struggling. They don't have a huge amount of cash coming in, and they need to give 20% to the royal family, to what they see as someone who is already rich, who is already privileged. So there are those issues happening, it's unmistakable, but other people would argue that the royals are a net profit for the UK, that they bring in a huge amount of tourism, that they boost the economy. I mean, you only need to look around you here today to see the amount of people that have spent money on flags, on clothing with Union Jacks on it. hats. Hotels are full. Restaurants have been fully booked out for days. I'm standing outside of Waterstones, and even that, the window is full of books to do with the royal family. So there's all different elements of the economy that is getting a boost from the royal family, not just when it comes to tourism, but lots of other elements too. They're patrons of charities. Charities get a lot of a boost from the royal family. So there's very much two arguments, you would say, for the financial benefit or the financial cost of the family.
All right, Juditha. First of all, before I come to you, Juditha, of course, we're seeing live pictures from London, and service personnel are still marching down the mall and into the Buckingham Palace as we speak. You can see some of them in the lush green there outside the Buckingham Palace. But, Juditha, I want to take you up on a picture I have in front of me. And this is the Archbishop of Canterbury putting out a picture of himself crowning King Charles III. And he says, and I quote, "May King Charles III be crowned with thy gracious favor and filled with abundant grace and princely virtues through Jesus Christ our Lord. God save the King." Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby putting out a picture. This is the social media era. The procession is not, or the coronation is not fully over. And we already having the Archbishop already putting out pictures of this very, very auspicious moment. Talk to us about social media and this particular event. How has social media reshaped the telling of the story of the coronation?
It's like the question that has come up and we've discussed over the run up to the coronation and today is, how does the royal family modernize? How do you speak to the new generations who see you as irrelevant and there is no point of connection between you? That's what Justin Welby is speaking to, because when you think of the tentacles and reach and the broadness of spectrum that social media has, what he is saying is that this is a moment that the entire world has the capacity to share. Those who will screen grab it, who will share it, who will tweet it, whether it goes viral, make memes about it. What he's trying to do is make it translatable to the language of the day. And that's what King Charles III has to do as well. Why do they all have Instagram pages and Twitter and Facebook? That is the language of the day. But when you think of the actual position of the Archbishop of Canterbury and him doing this being so poignant, after the Prince and Princess of Royal Blood, he is the highest ranking person in the country, which is historically that position. And the moments he has shared with King Charles III are sacred. In that moment where they were cordoned off under the behind the screen, that is a point where he wore the tunic that showed him King Charles as just a man before God, with Archbishop of Canterbury taking an oath. That is the honor, that is the honesty and the purity of the dedication of what it is to be king of the country. That guidance from God must come through a conduit of the Archbishop, and then you go on your way. The ceremonial robes come afterwards. So coming from Archbishop of Canterbury, he's saying almost like a paternal, a fatherly figure, as well as a custodian of faith, that here is what I have just christened, is like showing the child to the world who's just been born and saying, go on your way.
Indeed, Juditha. Now, Faith, there's perception right now that the monarchy seems to have a problem appealing to a younger generation of people there. Support has waned in opinion polls recently. Can you give us more insight on that?
Yes, I think that's absolutely fair. I think they can, especially when you look at the issue with Harry and Meghan, a lot of younger people not on the royal family's side with that. And before this coronation, before the Queen had died, there had been some suggestions from some younger people that actually perhaps they should just skip a generation and hand the monarchy straight to William and Kate rather than it being King Charles and Queen Camilla. So yeah, I think you have a point there, and the opinion polls have a point with young people being less invested in that. Having said that, I spoke to one protester here earlier he's anti-monarchist, and he was saying that lots of older people are not royalists either. You know, he was older himself, and he was saying that there is this perception that older people are very invested in the monarchy, and he was here to make the point that that's not always the case. So I think it's hard to do a broad brush stroke with this. There's younger people who are very invested and some who certainly aren't. But no, as you said, the opinion polls certainly showing that younger people are less invested in this monarchy, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. We see some images, as you were just speaking there on social media, there was a photo of William and Kate yesterday, the Prince and Princess of Wales, on the Queen Elizabeth line coming into Soho. And that photo was widely mocked because of the way they were dressed. I mean, who goes on the London Tube dressed like that? Because people, it's more casual there. People are rushing to work. People are generally stressed. And there was this, mocking tone that they were trying to kind of be amongst the people, but really it just backfired. So yeah, I think they do have their work cut out for them if they want to get younger people on board.
All right, Juditha, let's try to piggyback on what Faith has just spoken about, because Nick Wall, a member of the campaign group Republic and the chairman of the Labour for Republic organization, has actually addressed the crowd and at the Not My King rally holding in Cardiff, and he's actually hit out at the royal family and the government in several ways. But let me pick out something, and I quote him talking about Mr. Wall. He says that the right to protest is a long tradition. It is a privilege, and a deeply held tradition in this country. If this happened, let's say in Hong Kong, we would have politicians from all parties in outrage. Why should this be happening in the UK? So talk to me about this. He's actually calling the government, accusing them of double standards, so to speak. If in the UK, protesters are being clamped down on, but in Hong Kong, people speak against them. But in the meantime, we're seeing live pictures from the Buckingham Palace as troops are actually massing in the garden at the Buckingham Palace, where they will give a salute to the king, who has already arrived at the palace. Let's get to hear from you, Juditha.
Yeah, so it's weird. You've got this juxtapositioning of pride and ceremony with frustration and desire for change. But he is completely justified that the right to protest is a right of a democratic nation for every citizen. They do have that. And there were promises made that they would be allowed to protest as long as they kept it civil and did not try to obstruct the ceremony. So until we know the specifics of who had their placards taken, where they were stood, were they obstructing the procession, we can't pass judgments just yet. But then when you think of the layers to this, it's even more profound, because in the moment he became king, the ampulla and the golden coronation spoon, the eagle was meant to represent when the Virgin Mary appeared to Thomas Becket and said the next king would be a good king. But then when Oliver Cromwell came along, all of these ceremonial things were melted down because he felt it was a better use of money in the endeavors towards a republic. That 5 years later, that didn't work out. They brought back a new king with Charles II. It was Charles I with Oliver Cromwell. Charles II came in and they reintroduced these things and made a new ampulla, and that's what's christened Charles III. So the discussion between King Charles's and republics is storied. And so you have a modern version of an Oliver Cromwell, but how they navigate relations with him could be very disastrous or potentially changing in a positive direction. But the key thing is there must be an engagement between both parties that comes from a place of respect and the desire for positive progression. We watch now the latter stages of what has been a history-making coronation in a time that's tumultuous, to say the least. We're seeing the final parts where the armed forces and the members of the Royal Guard get to pay their salute to the newly crowned King Charles III and Queen Camilla. The precision of thousands of servicemen is something truly remarkable. From them prepping their uniforms, running the drills, knowing their timing. There are five military bands that were playing in unison at exactly the same time, marching to formation drills. This is what coronations and Great Britain is all about. The synchronization of this part of the ceremony that we're watching also runs in time with the public being let into the area around the Queen Victoria Memorial, in preparation for that moment that makes the photographs and history books that we've read and we've studied all around the world, which is the appearance on the Buckingham Palace balcony. The tandem of operations is entertaining, it's regal, but also it's so steeped in history. These servicemen will go on to tell these stories to those that come after, the representation of the armed forces, from those in active duty to those who are retired. They are all here playing their part in representing the new sovereign.
Royal Company of Archers! By the Lord!
As you see the different representatives of the different arms of the armed forces, from the Air Force to the Navy to the Army, male and female, old and young, of the varying ranks within each battalion and each regiment. This has all been done to represent what the different facets are of the Great British Armed Forces. Their flags, their regalia, their emblems, their active uniforms are all in their cupboards and put to rest. Today is all ceremonial garbs. So even that is steeped in tradition for representing what the tradition and the ceremony, which is completely different to representing the protections of Great Britain. now we begin to see the members of the public filing down the historic mall towards Buckingham Palace, where they will circle around the Victoria Memorial and stand at the gates of Buckingham Palace, awaiting the moment where the great British King Charles III will step onto the balcony with Queen Camilla and the selected members of the royal household and active royal duty members to wave to the public in what will most undoubtedly be a warm embrace of the new sovereign. The imagery of the flags of the Commonwealth flanked by the Union Jack, the golden statue at the top of the Victoria Memorial, one of the most beloved monarchs that there has been with her and King Albert, and then happy and glorious, adorning in banners. As they file in, everything says unity, respect, pride, and Britain, as they cement the moment in those final optics that will be King Charles's crowning glory as after what has been a successful coronation display. No doubt the security operations for this are something to be commended in the days to come, with tens of thousands deployed to not only protect the new King Charles, but also all the members of the public and the international public that have flown in specifically to witness this day. As we return again to looking at the display of the armed forces, around 7,000 personnel are on ceremonial duties. More than 9,000 members of the UK Armed Forces are participating in this. The coronation procession had 4,000. We saw hundreds of horses. The positions that have been occupied by members of the royal family have also been something quite touching and remarkable, but also steeped in history. We saw that the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, who is celebrated for being the hardest working royal in the whole of the firm, she was given the prestigious position of gold stick in waiting. She rode on horseback, a very competent rider and decorated one as well from competitions. And the gold stick in waiting is a symbolic position of the one trusted with the safety of the new king. That is the respect and recognition and trust that there is between brother and sister, King Charles III and Princess Royal, Princess Anne. That is something no doubt she would be very proud of. We've seen that in the moments after King Charles took off the colobium cindonis and put on the super tunica, his son, William, stepped forward to adorn him in his new robe and pledge his allegiance. In that moment where they looked eye to eye, it was not just king and subjects, it was father and son. His grandson, Prince George, one day to be King George, carries his robe of estate, different from the robe of state which he wore to Westminster Abbey, but came out as king in the robe of estate. From everything that you're watching now, we're now seeing that the yeomen of the guard are marching as well. We've seen the grooms and footmen, the household cavalry, as well as the postilions, all have pride of place. They form the structure that is the palace guards. They too are getting to celebrate what will hopefully be another long reign from the House of Windsor. In the sheer numbers we are watching, we know that there are around 200 personnel that are carrying the standards, colours, Gideons and the truncheon. There are more than 900 from the Royal Navy and Royal Marines, 4,000 from the British Army, 900 from the Royal Air Force, and as they gather now on the lawn, there is a unification of all the servants of the Crown. waiting for the sovereign to acknowledge the service, as he had before he walked away to enter to present himself on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. There you see how his commander-in-chief role of the armed forces must be fulfilled on this day, as well as his leader of the people position. Now we're watching the 900 representing the Royal Navy. There watching over them was the Prince of Wales, Prince William, himself a former serviceman, and now a king in waiting. The women of the army carrying the standard of the St. George Cross. Again, we continue to see the people, the British public and the international public who have flown in for this, filing down the Mall towards that grand circle around the Victoria Memorial and the gates of Buckingham Palace. You can see just the color and variety of peoples. That is why that was sewn into every part of the ceremony, and King Charles made sure to do so, from the recognition of the representatives of different churches, of different faiths, from Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, and Jewish. They were all represented and given pride of place. They are representative of peoples of different beliefs and different origins that have eventually settled to call Britain home and call themselves in turn British too. We saw the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and we saw the preceding British Prime Ministers. We've seen the connection of old history to new, from the Zodak the Priest, which was composed by George Friedrich Handel for George II back in 1727. It's played at every coronation. At the moment, the king takes his religious oath before just God and the Archbishop of Canterbury. And then afterwards, we saw a young black composer, Roderick Williams, who had composed one of the 12 pieces specifically for the coronation. It's a colorful coronation. It's a multiracial coronation, because that is what the new Britain looks like. And that is the country that King Charles III has to preside over in order to be a success and keep hold of the House of Windsor. As they say about British people, a little bit of bad weather doesn't shake that stiff upper lip, and they are there with their Macs and their brollies and enjoying with their flags of the Union Jack. Young and old, foreign and domestic, everyone's here braving the weather to be part of history. Again, security never being too far from operations, we can see the members of the Metropolitan Police preceding the hordes of people that follow. And it's a momentous task to know that you can wrangle that many people to keep them in accordance with the order of the day. But that is what they've been hired to do. That is what they have to be successful at, and they know that they too are playing their part in history, in unifying the new the King of Britain and his people. So it's a duty that is both one of pride, but also one of great responsibility. But the Metropolitan Police has taken this on their broad shoulders with pride. Looking at the vast hordes of people, you're beginning to see the different flags of the different countries represented. We've seen Brazil, we've seen Bahamas, we've seen Mauritius, we've seen Switzerland. That is just how far and wide people have journeyed to be part of this day. And it's an ocean of people. It makes me think back to the moment when Prince William married Kate Middleton, that she was then, and they stepped out onto the balcony, and as soon as she walked out, she gasped, because just the sight of an ocean of people there to celebrate you took her breath away. And Prince William took her by the hand and reassured her it would be okay, and they stepped out onto the balcony and had that beautiful moment. King Charles is a veteran at this, so I don't think his breath will be taken away, but indeed it will be reassuring to him and Camilla, no doubt, that this many people turned out to share in the most important day of his life at that most celebratory moment. To people, again, the visuals of a modern society, of social media, everyone's taking those selfies and those photographs to say, this is where I was on May the 6th, 2023, when the new king was crowned. I was at the mall, I was near Buckingham Palace, I saw it happen. You're seeing children that are too young to remember this, but they will see photographs in years to come as their parents say, I took you there and you were there. So whether you remember it or not, you were a part of history too. And then they'll probably be crowning, who knows, a King George, and look back on this and see what a trajectory and what a path of history that I too have lived through. The weather has been tumultuous, but the hope is that it will hold out long enough to see that fly past of about 60 aircrafts who will perform a 6-minute display that will include the red arrows and historic Spitfires from the Battle of Britain memorial flight, as well as a separate 16 aircraft helicopter formation, which will also pass through the skies. There are probably a lot of meteorologists biting their fingernails down to their nubs, hoping that they'll be able to pull it off, because the fly past is almost a British tradition that is as old as the royal family itself. Again, section by section, regiment by regiment, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, all sides marching side by side, time to perfection, as they curve their way around the Victoria Memorial. Those lucky enough to get those seats you see on the risers at the side, covered in their rain protective wear, they have pride of position. We can see the hats and the umbrellas, the Union Jack suits, the t-shirts, the flags. Everyone is kind of, in the sense, the feeling of the day, for them to have waited, some for days, count out, waiting, making sure they had a position to witness the procession, and now meandering their way into.
You're still watching the coronation of King Charles III, and of course we've seen a procession of military parades, and of course these are the people, multiracial people, walking down the streets, the region of Buckingham Palace, to pay their respects to the newly coronated king. And of course our chief correspondent John Cookson is here with us on this. John, it's good to have you with us. We've been speaking with our other colleagues, Judita and of course Shaiton and Faith Orr. What are your impressions so far about the coronation?
Hi Nahi, good to see you. Well, look, at this moment thousands of people are surging forward. They've been in the Mall all day. They've been getting wet, the same as I have been watching events in the park, and this is the moment that thousands of people have been waiting for, because in a few minutes from now the royal family, we're not sure exactly what time, but they're going to appear on the balcony, the velvet balcony behind me, and as I say, these people have been waiting, some of them for days. They've been camped out in the Mall, which is the road that connects Trafalgar Square to the Buckingham Palace. So this is a great moment for them, and I'm sure when the royal family, when the new king and queen come out into the balcony, they'll get a massive cheer. It'll be interesting to see which other members of the royal family are on the balcony with the slimmed down version of the royals that the new king has promised us. Certainly, of course, we'll have the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children, but maybe not Prince Harry. Harry looked to me like he needed a hug in Westminster Abbey, sitting not alone but with other members of the family. He won't be on the balcony. I doubt if Prince Andrew will be on the balcony either. Let me just turn to see what's going on, and people in their thousands from all over the world surging forward now to fill the space in front of Buckingham Palace for this prize moment for them, to get a real close-up of the new king and queen, and you can see perhaps the flags and general jubilation, the hats, as they all surge forward. As for the service itself, well, wow, you know, only the Brits can do something like that. It was held in a church that's 1,000 years old. The ceremony was 1,000 years old. The king was crowned with the Prince Edward crown from 1300s. He sat in a chair from the 1300s. Queen Camilla and King Charles came back to Buckingham Palace in a gold state coach, which is 300 years old. I mean, look, there's no country on earth can put on that kind of spectacle. And I found much of the ceremony very moving. The anointing of Charles behind screens with sacred oil, and then of course the crowning of King Charles. I mean, what a moment. Surely what was going through his head at that time? I'm sure he was thinking of his mother, the late Queen, and all of his ancestors who had sat in that position, having the crown, and being crowned king of the United Kingdom. What a moment for him. And then coming back in the gold coach with Camilla, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in the gold coach and hearing what they were saying to each other. So a magnificent service. There are detractors, of course, in this country. People who believe that they want a republic, not a monarchy. But for the time being, we have a monarch. We have a new monarch, and a new monarch will surely make his mark in the coming years.
All right, John. Two quick questions. First of all, we heard about a news of something that's happened in the course of the coronation. We heard that a horse was spooked, and the horse decided to rear a little bit backwards into the crowd, but nobody was hurt. Just give us your thoughts about that. But we are seeing the number of people, the sheer number of people, the excitement on their faces. Is this a referendum of how popular King Charles is at this monarchy? Because we've been speaking about the monarchy splitting opinions, but the pictures we are seeing right now says 1,000 words. Talk to us about their popularity.
I can't really help you with what spooked the horse. I mean, horses do that. I've watched Trooping at the Colours here in London, and horses get spooked from time to time. Animal rights protesters said that they were going to pull off some kind of stunt and let off a rape alarm. I don't know whether that was the cause of it, but I can't really help you much more on that, only to say that horses do get spooked from time to time. Is this a referendum on what the people think about the monarchy? Absolutely not. You've got to remember that these people here believe in the royal family, they support the royal family, and the vast majority of British people do. And of course there are people not only from the UK but from all over the world come to be here for this historic moment, and many of them will remember that, and I will remember this moment all the rest of my life, at the point where King Charles was crowned. There have been surveys recently, and you've heard that some of them have not been terribly favourable for the royal family, but YouGov, a respected pollster, asked the British people recently, do they want to keep the monarchy? And 62% of them said yes, although that was down from 75% in 2013. They were asked, is the monarchy good for the country? And 58% of British people said yes, they thought that it was. They were also asked, was the monarchy good value for money? And 54% of the people said yes, it was. The noise and the excitement here is absolutely palpable. Let me just turn again to witness for myself what we're watching here, of thousands and thousands of people filing up the Mall. They've been waiting for this moment for days, some of them have been camped out in tents for days, and they're surging now in front of Buckingham Palace for a scene that we've seen many times before, royal weddings, and all going back, footage from the end of the Second World War when Queen Elizabeth famously, and they're starting to cheer. I'll just turn and see. There seems to be movement on the balcony. I'll step out of the way. Yes, the new King and Queen on the balcony now. You're probably seeing better pictures of it than I am. When the balcony appearance is over, we're expecting a fly past of RAF planes, which is going to be scaled back. So we've run out of time, so I'll hand you back now to the studio. Thank you.
All right, John Cookson, our chief correspondent there, many thanks for your thoughts on these issues. And we now continue with the processes of the coronation of King Charles III and, of course, his wife, Camilla.
Buckingham Palace as they watched the final people who managed to squeeze in to that space around the front of the gate, around the gates of Buckingham Palace. There was a lot of controversy that surrounded the run-up to who would make the list to stand on the balcony, because this is a photo that will join the one that came before with Queen Elizabeth and the one that came before that with her father, and all the ones preceding. We know that it's Prince William and Kate. We know his siblings, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, the page boys. There's Prince George, Charlotte, Louis, and all his grandchildren. They've made the cut, and they're standing by him at this auspicious moment as he looks on the subjects of the United Kingdom and waves as their new sovereign. It said that the new Queen Camilla had been very particular that she wanted members of her family to have some participation in the events, knowing that as a former Camilla Parker Bowles, they weren't royal born, she was not the first wife of the now King Charles, but some of her grandchildren did manage to be page boys and assist in the ceremony and will be supporting her, as well as her 2 children. For whatever controversies may have surrounded how this new regal couple came to be, their families have stood by their side. And Camilla Parker Bowles' son has said that he's proud of how she hasn't complained and taken on the duty and position that she now holds. And that is all that a mother could ask for as she assumes a role in a reign that will be wrought with challenges, as well as hopefully some triumphs that they can leave behind. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. And now we see the helicopters braving the cloudy weather to play their part in this coronation. It was reported that a 16 aircraft helicopter formation would fly through the skies at this moment. And here they are, performing that aerial display to mark the end of a remarkable day of celebration. And in another moment of symbolism just there, we saw Kate and Sophie Wessex, Prince William. They are the next in line, and Kate will occupy the position that Camilla holds now. Both adorned in their crowns, King Charles III in the imperial state crown, which he swapped over from King Edward's crown, which is said to be twice the weight. And we remember the moment when Sir David Attenborough had an interview with the late Queen Elizabeth II, and she talked about what it is to be coronated and have King Edward's crown on your head. She said it was so heavy, but her concern was that she didn't tip in any direction and the crown fall off her head. While so much important stuff was going on around her, that was her primary concern. So you can imagine that there were moments that King Charles had the same sentiment. Queen Camilla wears Queen Mary's crown, as well as a special new robe of estate that was made for her by Eden Ravenscroft, who made the state gown for the late Queen Elizabeth II, which she wore on her way into the coronation, and then put on her new estate robe on the way out. And here we have the fly past. And almost like a sign from the gods, there it was, the skies cleared, the fly past happened, the red, white and blue of the Union Jack adorned the skies, and a roar from the crowd in celebration. As though with beautiful aerial signature on the end of a contract of the new king and his country, there we have, on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, King Charles III and Queen Camilla. And with a wave and a smile, there you have it. A new reign begins in a very different Great Britain to the one that his mother stood on the balcony for in 1953. Prince William and Kate, who stood on that balcony front and center at their wedding, waving in the robes that King Charles wore, and his uncles and aunts are wearing all the symbolism of the hierarchy of the House of Windsor. And as Queen Camilla departs, followed by her ladies-in-waiting and page boys, King Charles III gives a last look over the visuals of a coronation to remember. Away from a king, the flags of thousands of people waving back. Her contract made through emotion and patriotism happens here this day on May 6, 2023. Great Britain crowned their new king. Now as the Royal Guard file away from the grounds of Buckingham Palace, so too will the crowds of people begin to slowly trickle away back down the mall to the various corners of London or their hotels if they flew in from abroad, and to the garden parties and the celebrations. Now is the after party where the champagne corks will pop, the bunting, the cakes, the picnics, everything will be a toast to the memories that have been forged this day and the tales of what you did and where you were as it happened. King Charles and Queen Camilla returning to the balcony for another wave. It'll be a relief, to say the least, for Camilla that she's pulled this off, as they say. For King Charles, it will be a reassurance that there is a realm for him to preside over now. As custodian, he just has to make sure he secures it to pass on to his son, Prince William. The page boys returning to help them with their robes of estate, meters long in design, but steeped in tradition.
Okay, we are still watching the coronation of King Charles III, which has come to some form of conclusion with the coronation procedures at the Westminster Abbey, and of course the final return to Buckingham Palace, where we saw moments ago a fly past of military aircraft, helicopters, contingents of the Red Arrows, spraying the colors of the Union Jack, red, white, and blue. And of course, even the little one having a fun time at this coronation process. Crowds are gathered from different parts of the world, going back to their respective places. And of course, it won't end here. There will be more tomorrow, which will be a celebratory aspect of the coronation. And of course, there's been aspects of the weather. There's concerns about the weather, but of course we can see right there, rains coming down, and more like showers of blessings, as it were.
All right. Let's say that the British anti-monarchy group Republic said several of its members have been arrested as they prepared to peacefully protest the coronation of King Charles III. And the group planned to hold placards and chant, "Not my king," during the monarch's procession to Westminster Abbey. It says police were informed in advance of its plans, but on Saturday morning, several of the group's members were stopped near Trafalgar Square and led to police vans. Police said they will have a low tolerance for people seeking to disrupt the day, sparking criticism that they are clamping down on free speech.
So look, a bunch of our organisers arrived this morning with placards. It's a completely peaceful demonstration. The police, without telling us why, without telling us where they're taking them, have arrested all of our lead organisers, and they've seized all our placards. It feels like something out of a police state, because we still don't know why anyone's been arrested, and we still don't know where they're taking our people. You know, Britain's meant to be a democracy, but Charles isn't treating it like one. They're coming up this lane with their placards in order to deliver to the protest down there. The police, even though there were other vans coming and going, seized our particular van with all the placards and arrested our organisers.
Annie, there was accusations that there was glue, intention to kind of glue yourselves to things. Is that true?
No, it's Trafalgar Square. What would we glue ourselves to?
So I'm joined by Mark Ward, who is one of the protesters here in Trafalgar Square. Mark, can you tell me, why have you come here today?
I've come here to exercise my democratic right. Because of the saturation coverage on the BBC and the right-wing dominated newspapers, you might get the impression that everyone in the country is a royalist. And you need to understand that even amongst older people like me, support for it is on the decline. There are certain questions about how long we will have these democratic rights, because the leader of Republic was arrested earlier today, but it seemed the natural thing to do. People here are here to express their love of the royal family, to express hatred, but rather a love of democracy and free speech.
And this is an expensive event at a time when Britain is having a cost of living crisis. What would you say to that?
Well, apparently figures are the establishment are always very fuzzy about how much things cost, but they're talking about £250 million. And if you include the babies and the toddlers, that works out at £4 each. But I have had royalists who've said to me, if you don't like them, why bother to come? And my answer to that is, I've paid for this just as much as you, and I don't have the right to withdraw my £4 tax.
So we did just hear a lot of boos there from the crowd. We know that the procession is en route. That could be them passing. That's not the Republicans booing. We're not doing that. We have our official slogan, "Not our king." We're not here to boo or to harass any of the royalists. They're going to have a great day, but we're going to have a great day too. But the booing you're hearing, and I've heard this from time to time, it's actually from the royalists who are booing because we are there. But this is a police designated area for us to protest. That has been granted to us. And so actually the royalists who are booing, they'd be better off with their friends up the Mall nearer to the palace. They would. And just finally, there's been a new public order law put in place which bans serious disruption. Now, it's not particularly aimed at today, but it is having an impact today. What's your thoughts about that law overall? Well, it seems a bit strange that it was rushed in on Wednesday, just 3 days ago in advance. I think the thing is, our right-wing media is saturated by talk of the royals, whether it's obsequious, bowing down, saying how wonderful they are, or whether it's infighting between the princes, and that fuzzies people's minds when they should actually be thinking of, is this country serving the majority of people, many of whom are really suffering in this financial crisis? And to your viewers at home, I would say we also oppose the monarchy because it was part and parcel of the racism and oppression of the British Empire. We apologise to you, and on your behalf, we are here today to stand up for what is right. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
That was Faith All speaking in Trafalgar Square with one of the protesters, Not My King. And of course, we still have Judita with us in our London studio to give more heads up on what's happening. Judita, talking about specifics now. Okay, the lack of cohesion between Harry and William, how is that impacting on public opinion over there? And of course, the Meghan factor.
I think over the course of the last few years, the last couple of years, there's been a division of loyalties. When you look back over the past decade and even before, Harry was arguably the most popular person in the royal family. They saw him as an embodiment of the free spirit and the open emotion and character and verve and dynamism of Diana. William was a lot more buttoned down, but then again, that was in keeping with the characteristics of what would be a king. But in the post-departure and exodus from the royal family that was Harry and Meghan's, and subsequently the scorched earth tirade of an emotional outpour of a hurt soul that has been Harry towards his family, and with the embracing of America to provide him with outlets to pretty much just bear all, which is something that is antithetical to what the royal family is, particularly when it has been aimed directly at Prince William. What has happened is what a lot of British people say would break Diana's heart. Her motivation and what kept her focused was the love she had for her children. Through so much hurt and so much heartache, she had her two boys. To think that now that they are so diametrically opposed in their motivations and the direction they're going in life, it truly would, we can believe, break her heart. But then what you have to understand is that marriage changes people. People always seem to look at the royal family and forget that they are human beings. The House of Windsor has proven that they create generation after generation of men who lose their mind for love. Edward abdicated for Wallis Simpson. Charles tore apart his family dynamic and what would have been the queen of dreams for the love of Camilla. And Harry has turned his back on a country that loved him and a position he'd held on to his entire life for the love of Meghan Markle. Queen Elizabeth must literally have sat and watched this happen around her and scratched her head and said, what is it about the men of our family? But it just shows that they feel profoundly. So one can only hope that with King Charles in the driving seat, as a father of two children who are effectively at war, he will do everything he can to mend fences and leave behind a legacy of unity between the custodians of his line of succession and the House of Windsor for his part of it.
But some will feel that probably Harry might have crossed a particular line of no return in terms of mending fences, with the book coming out, with the Oprah's interview, with the Netflix documentary, with books still in the works for Meghan Markle. It's like this will never end in terms of breaking and almost trying to ensure that there is a gulf between the successes and the rest of the royal family.
Indeed. I think what the problem is now is, like you said, he's crossed a line of no return to an extent. That is why there has to be a greater power to step in to mend those fences by force. That is King Charles. But what you have to understand, which people don't realize, is that Harry is in a very unique position. He has grown up his entire life within the confines and protections of the firm. From what he has done and the choices he has made, where he is now is out on an island in virgin territory and also hostile territory. He's made a move to Hollywood. He is working in show business in America. It is basically a den of sharks. He is also a husband and a father of two. He has to be a provider on a level that most of us will never know when it comes to wealth. But what he's now understanding is that he picks up the bill and pays the invoice for everything, whereas the royal purse used to do that before. That is a scary prospect. And having moved into the sphere of entertainment, he's understanding that the only value you have in America is your connection to this family. So he needs to preserve it because, in the language of the day, it breeds content. The next phase of Harry in America will be, what was it like going to your father's coronation? That's the next phase of content that will come out of the Harry and Meghan camp. I think of a reference point that always haunts me when a Hollywood celebrity, Nick Cannon, had said when he was married to Mariah Carey, for her to walk out of the front door to do anything, it costs $250,000 between security and insurance and staff and transport and accommodation and hair and makeup and wardrobe and everything else. Before she even gets to her destination, it's $250,000. But Mariah Carey is not Prince Harry, who is arguably the hottest property in the press today. But Harry has to pick up the bill for everything, so he has to make money and keep making it. So there are decisions that he must make as a shrewd businessman, as well as a dedicated father. So showing up for this coronation had a twofold necessity: to be there for his father, but also to continue to maintain a link to the lifeblood of how he sustains a living abroad.
But a lot of people will say that, isn't that ironic that the same family you're almost denigrating is still the same family that is giving you the platform to be whatever you want to be out there in the open?
That is exactly what a lot of people are saying in Britain, that they don't understand why he's played it the way he has. The reason they liked them so much in the beginning was it seemed like the most romantic fairy tale, that he took the woman of his heart, the woman of his dreams, and for love he turned back on family and country for her. And they expected he would do something similar to the Princess of Japan, who fell in love with a normal guy, and then when she was removed from the family, she moved to New York. They live in a humble apartment and they have 9-to-5 jobs. That's a story of love. They didn't expect to hear anything else from Harry and Meghan. They expected them to just go off into the sunset and be in love and be together. And that would have given a fairy tale ending, even though a hurtful one, because he's no longer in the country. But like you said, his cash cow is the family he keeps attacking. So one would think, wouldn't you just sever ties and plow your own furrow on your own? But like I told you, in America, in the den of sharks that is entertainment, the only value he has is his connection to the royals. He has no discernible talent as a singer or as a writer, as a sportsman. You're just a human being that's part of an incredible family, and that family pays your bills.
Indeed, and we're still witnessing crowds of people and well-wishers walking through the grounds of Buckingham Palace, some lingering to take selfies, and just enjoying the moods of the day. We can see a policeman also doing that in the view. Okay, Judita, an area of sensitivity for the royal family has been perception of their attitudes towards race from the fallout of the Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, to the treatment of black charity founder Ngozi Fulani at a Buckingham Palace reception. This is still a thorny issue, don't you think so?
Absolutely, and that's what goes to the importance of the era that has been Meghan Markle and Harry. What they had was a dynamite opportunity to show the movement of a country from the very first family that governs it. But they, as they say, fumbled the ball. Because even if they say that there are no racist members in the royal family, the ignorance they showed towards an opportunity to embrace difference, to embrace diversity and change, just further cements the opinion people have of them, that you're so of a different time, you are unwilling to embrace change when it looks different. It is okay to have black people at a distance, but when they are in your family, when they will be incorporated into your bloodline, it's too far, it's too much. And so you closed ranks, you made her feel like such an outsider, you made her feel unsupported. You drove her to the point of contemplating suicide, and she left, and Harry left with her. When you look at what happened with Ngozi Fulani, or when you look at even what Camilla did when she went to the school and touched a black child like she was something, an object of dirt. Again, it reinforces those images of an old empire that saw black people as lesser than. The firm is a very tightly organized institution. Optics will make or break the reign of King Charles. They have to manage Camilla very well. They have to manage him very well. Because if they continue along the line of in public, I will deign to mingle with those who are different, but then within my circle of comfort, I do not. That's juxtapositioning of a duality that is completely incongruous will not sell, particularly to such a shrewd and cynical modern society.
All right, Judith, looking at everything, it's not all doom and gloom, because a lot of people commend King Charles III for his humanitarian side, the activism role he actually takes on board time and time again. And some are saying that this might be a breath of fresh air, understanding that to an extent he understands this particular generation and what it is like to live in this particular generation.
I think it's been a very fortuitous stroke that has landed on King Charles's reign. He has been a champion for the dangers of polluting the atmosphere. He's been a conservationalist for as long as we can remember. In a time when people mocked him and laughed at him for being ridiculous, now people remember that this was a man who stayed the course. And when you think that right now, saving the planet is the hot button topic, to have King Charles now step onto to sit on the throne and know that to his core, he truly believes in being greener, in preservation of nature, and doing things in a way that can take the country to net zero, hopefully. Around the world, the young people who are champions for this cause will say he can be a lightning rod to show other world leaders that you can occupy a position of power and exert an influence that will create a change that will save humanity. King Charles III could potentially leave behind a legacy that he was the king that truly set in motion the salvation of planet Earth.
All right, now reflecting during South Africa's president's visit last autumn, King Charles said, quote, "We must acknowledge the wrongs which have shaped our past if we're to unlock the part of our common future," end of quote. Now, however, there's been call for more action. It's been said the relationship between the monarchy and the Caribbean is tense currently. And there's suggestion for reparations and adopting a language of apology. Do you see this happening soon? And not just the Caribbean, but other agitators within the Commonwealth?
It's a very dicey one, because when you look at world leaders across the world throughout history, one thing you're told is that you cannot appear to be weak. So that whole conversation around apologies is always a dicey one. When King Charles has addressed it, he's expressed regret at what happened, but I doubt you'll ever hear him say the words, "I'm sorry," because even in legal terms, when you say "I'm sorry," that is an expression of culpability, and you can be held to that. So what he has to do is show progress through action, which is what he's doing. He sanctioned the investigation into the houses of Hanover to see how they profited from the transatlantic slave trade. That would be around the South Sea Company. That was a parliamentary institution that was presided over by Queen Anne, and then subsequently the 4 King Georges. What he's showing is he's starting a conversation. But how far is he willing to go? Time will tell, because when you're talking about the slave trade and what happened in the Caribbean islands, This goes all the way back to, as far as recorded history goes, 1564, when Elizabeth I, the great queen who presided over the Golden Era, profited for the first merchant cargo shipment whose manifest included slaves under a man called Thomas Hawkins. Are you going to investigate right back to the beginning? Because you would have to if you're willing to be honest. What Black Brits say is, when you tell the story of Britain, tell it all. Tell it truthfully, so that the history and the identity of Britain is woven into the presence of Black people, as it has been, because unlike America, who performed their crimes in their backyard, Britain did just the same stuff and possibly even worse, but they were smart enough to keep their mess abroad. Now there has to be a reconciliation of history. So what happened, happened. Your part in it was your part in it, and the records must show for generations to come.
All right, Juditha, let's talk about King Charles's leadership qualities and what the roles he will be taking on. First of all, there are talks that several of his staff might lose his job as he has actually moved to the Buckingham Palace at the moment. And some are saying that he's a man fit for the role because he learned under his mother for decades. And he had hands-on experience when the Queen wasn't strong enough. And right now, this is the man for the job, and he will take the monarchy to the next level. Talk to us about that. Do people still believe in him? And
I think it will have to be action again. Time will tell. But it will work in his favor, because what you find is, with having a predecessor like Queen Elizabeth II, who was so respected, what Charles now has is the motivation to prove himself and stand separate from her. So his desire to do things that are completely opposite to what she did will help define the reign of King Charles III. We know that he is already shaking the halls of the palaces, saying to the members of his family, cut down costs. You are not going to be financed by the royal purse anymore. Thin down your living. Those who are working royals will earn the money they get from the royal purse. British people do want to hear that, but they then want to see it, because they recognize that part of the things that fuels the ire of groups like Republic is the extravagant spending and the gay abandon with which you show off who you are and what you have. That doesn't work anymore. So if King Charles does put his money where his mouth is, or take the money from where his mouth is, as he says, make his family spend less, focus on conservation, help the planet, a slimmed down monarchy, a less expensive monarchy, and then we look at the tally of expenses. When the bottom line comes in with a total that was cheaper than the years of Queen Elizabeth II, he will be applauded for it.
Talking about spending less, how much the coronation will cost in terms of public spending won't be revealed by the government until after the event. So are critics looking forward to this?
Oh, they're chomping at the bit, they're salivating to see the number, because when you have facts and figures, no one can argue with that. And what you have is, it's almost currency to motivate people to see a justification for your cause. It happens all the time, from the royal weddings to coronations. There's a prediction of how much it will cost, and then the actuality afterwards. So it does take time to tally everything. The security operation will be expensive. When you think about it, the jewels and the regalia aren't expensive because they've already been purchased and are already owned by the royal family. But then you offset that against the money that will be made in tourism and the buying of merchandise and all the salespersons and all the little boutiques and shops that have benefited from this. Again, in both sentiment as well as currency, the tally will show what was made in terms of profit and what was lost in terms of expense. And when you measure one against another, we'll then know just how much of a negative spin could be put on today's coronation.
All right, talking about the spin that will be put on this particular coronation, as we look back at this particular coronation, will people still look back with fond memories and saying that, damn the numbers, we had something to always cherish this was once in a lifetime event. Regardless of what happened, we had our own share of the fun. We had our own share of being part of history.
I do think so, because I think older people realize exactly what is happening, because they know, those who are still alive from 1953 remember what it meant, because having seen Queen Elizabeth pass away, that moment means all the more. It's all the more poignant, it's all the more special, it's all the more historic. So the fact that they're seeing a second one, they know how important it will be down the line. Younger people, not as much, until they get to an age where either they see the passing of King Charles III and then the accession to the throne of King William, or even just as wisdom comes with age and you realize that on May the 6th, I saw history. I was a part of history. When my children's children study this for exams, I can say I was there. I know what happened. I know what he looked like. I lived it. I smelt it. I breathed it. That's the value that moments like this have, because that value is a value that lasts a lifetime. So while they complain now, trust me, in decades down the line, they will secretly appreciate the fact that their parents made the effort to take them there, or they just said, what the hell, let's just go. At least then I can say I was there.
Indeed, Juditha. Now, will the new king adopt the monarchy to suit modern times, you think? There's already concerns younger people need more convincing of their relevance.
It's a tough one, because from what we've seen that far, we could be wrong. The nature of Charles as a person is he doesn't seem very capable of understanding what modernity is as far as the common man goes. But he will have to learn, and he will have to learn quickly. If you cast your mind back to the tragedy of Princess Diana, Queen Elizabeth was faced with a turn in the tide as far as the opinion of the people, because that streak they have of looking so aloof and so removed that you almost lack humanity really upset people. But then in a moment, she broke with tradition. As the cars pulled up to Buckingham Palace, she told them to stop. She stepped out and she went to the people. She spoke to them. She embraced them. She thanked them for their support. And just like that, she changed the mood of the city. She changed the mood of the country. That's what a monarch has to do. King Charles has to learn how to engage with people. It's one thing to be intelligent, to be well-bred, to be well-read, to be into opera and the arts. But until you can speak to the average person who's got a YouTube page or has 1 million followers on Instagram and doesn't care about you, you are doomed to fade. And like I've said, if the King Charles should fail, the House of Windsor will fall and Britain will be changed forever, and not necessarily in a good way.
All right, but let's still dial our minds back to Prince Harry. What's the latest concerning him? Is he still around at the Buckingham Palace, or has he exited and flown back to the US?
From the plans for his route that we have heard, he's probably making a beeline for the airport to get back to Montecito to be with Archie for his 4th birthday, and with Meghan Markle and their close group of friends who are there celebrating with them. Because remember, there's a very cautious sentiment around Harry. While he's in front of us, he was there with his cousins, Zara Tindall. We was there with Eugenie and Beatrice and all their spouses. There is just a wariness around Harry, because he's basically plugged into the nature of America, where everything is for sale. And whatever they say could end up in American media next week. And we know we're going to hear about the Harry story of the coronation in weeks and months to come. So they will be very cautious. So being in such a cold atmosphere, it's no surprise that he wants to get out quickly back to the warm embrace of the family that has become his cocoon of safety.
All right, Juditha, we'll be with you shortly. We have Chief Correspondent John Cookson with us at the moment. John, it's good to have you again. Now, we've had a series of industrial strikes in England, and of course, government's response so far, which hasn't been too encouraging, as it were. So, has there been any comments from the monarchy under the new king so far on that?
Hey Nee, good to see you. Well, look, the monarch is, in theory and in reality, supposed to be non-political, so there's no way in the world that the late Queen or indeed the new King would get involved in strikes. They just wouldn't do that. That said, the Prime Minister has an audience every week with the monarch, and it will be discussed then, but whatever's discussed at these meetings between the monarch and the Prime Minister are always kept confidential. Some monarchs have good relationships with Prime Ministers, others not. The Queen, for example, didn't get on particularly well with Margaret Thatcher, although she did get on well with Tony Blair. But to answer your question, there is no way that Prince Charles would get involved in industrial relations. And look, it would be very dangerous for the monarchy to do that. The monarch is supposed to be the head of the judiciary, the legislature and the executive, and strictly non-political. Now, Charles has, I have to say, in the past strayed slightly into the political field, but only to boost some of his campaigns to do with saving the planet and climate change. So I hope that answers your question. Look now, the crowds behind me still in front of Buckingham Palace. I have to tell you, it's absolutely tipping it down with rain. Everyone's getting soaked, but you know, it doesn't seem to matter too much. Everyone's happy to be here for this historic occasion. I'm joined by Arise News' Faith. Faith, welcome to Buckingham Palace. You've been somewhere else today.
I have indeed. I have been over in Trafalgar Square today, where we have seen groups of protesters as well as groups of royal fans. And that's been the one spot on the procession route that I think we've actually been hearing some boos today, because the atmosphere there was just a little bit different. There were quite a large group of protesters holding up yellow signs, some quite polite, just simply reading "Not My King," and some, well, in the British tradition, not quite so polite, it has to be said. But there was this sort of competing narrative, because at the same location we had all of these royal fans, some of them decked out head to toe Union Jack outfits. Now, the crowd started gathering quite early. You know, I made my way here as you did this morning. Before 8 a.m. the Mall was full. By the time I got here, just after 8, Green Park was full, people weren't allowed in. So there's been this huge public appetite, but we can't ignore that there are people who aren't celebrating this event, who are against the monarchy, and those voices have been heard today as well.
It came as a bit of a surprise that these people were arrested, because earlier in the week there was a change in the law, and the cops said that they would be lenient on this, but the leader of the Republic movement was arrested. Tell us more about that.
Yes, so the leader and about 5 other members were arrested this morning, and hundreds of placards reading "Not My King" were seized by the Metropolitan Police. And you're right, there has been this sort of back and forth with the police this week. Initially, they had been given permission to go ahead with this protest. That was the designated spot in Trafalgar Square. That was where they were to gather. It was all going to be okay. As long as they peacefully protest, they were going to be allowed to do that. Then the police changed their tune and said, "We are not going to tolerate disruption today. The bar will be very low. We will be arresting people. We will be shutting down protest." Then the security minister, Tom Tugendhat, he stepped in and he said, no, these protests will be allowed to go ahead. And as you mentioned there's a new law, and this is all to do with that new law. It's a new public order law, and what that does is it bans what's being described as serious disruption. Now, it was rushed through before the coronation, but it's not just for the coronation. It's for things like the environmental protests that are shutting down motorways, people gluing themselves to buildings. But it is being used today as well.
There's one question I want to ask you. You're a proud Scot, and the Scots aren't big fans of the royal family. Many are, but there's a tendency in Scotland not to support the monarchy. Do you think this event today, which was absolutely unbelievable in its splendour and its pomp and its circumstance, do you think it will change the minds of many Scots?
No, I don't. quite simply. There's a feeling in Scotland, I've been there the past few weeks, and most people just don't care. They're not particularly anti-monarchy, but they're not fans. They're just going about their daily life. Okay, if we get an extra day off, that's fine. There was an event in Princes Street Gardens in the Scottish capital, Edinburgh, today. A big screen set up and a lot of seating out. They were expecting a crowd there. I think about 12 people showed up to watch the coronation in that public
But what's
event.
the beef? What are the Scots? Why don't they like the royals?
I mean, there's been a move towards Scottish independence lately, and that's all tied in. Our new First Minister, Humza Yousaf, he's a Republican. He wants, rid of the monarchy. So there is that sentiment that's shared in Scotland, not by everyone. There are unionists in Scotland, there are people that are very pro the monarchy, but there is more people in Scotland who are either against it or, as I said, just simply don't care very much.
Thanks, Faith. Well, we've had an incredible day so far. Both Faith and I have been privileged to be here for this, for some of us, once in a lifetime coronation event. A short time ago, the royal family appeared on the balcony, this velvet balcony behind me, in the rain, and they've got a massive cheer from people who've been waiting for days for that moment. The King and Queen looking splendid in their crowns, an image that will flash around the world, not only now, but we'll see these images for many, many years to come. Some people missing from the royal balcony, Prince Harry. He's allegedly back on his way to America, to Los Angeles, to spend some time with his son, who's 4 years old today. He spent less than 24 hours in the UK, and as I said earlier, he was in Westminster Abbey, sitting with other members of the royal family, but very much in need of a hug, I would say. So a new chapter has opened in British history. We have a new king, a new queen, and a new monarchy. I've no doubt that Charles will make some changes. He's already made some changes already by introducing Camilla to us. Now, perhaps 10 years ago, it would be unthinkable that Camilla would be called Queen rather than Queen Consort, or indeed that Charles would marry a divorcee. Of course, we go back in the past, King Edward VIII had to give up the throne because he wanted to marry a divorcee. So Charles has introduced change already, and the service that we saw today was very, very inclusive at Westminster Abbey. All the major religions represented there, and we had a Hindu Prime Minister giving a reading from the Bible. So a monarch that will bring change, a monarchy that has to change with the swiftly changing times, and we've had a front row seat to the opening chapter of that, guys.
Well, spot on that, as we brought the coronation of King Charles III to our viewers live from London. All right, we still see those that came out in the numbers to celebrate and also be part of history, still braving the rain and braving the weather, to still hang around and probably soak in the moment, soak in the occasion.
They are soaking it with selfies and pictures and all manner of...
It is expected.
Trying to entertain themselves as well, not just restricted to the people, but even some of the security personnel are manning the region of Buckingham Palace. People still going about their business, just having a feel of the historic feat being achieved here. Of course, we still have Judita with us. Judita, earlier on, while we spoke with John Cookson and of course Faith Orr, there were the reactions of other regions of the UK talking about the Scotland and of course Ireland itself not being too excited about today's event. I'd like your thoughts on that.
People from Africa or from India or parts of the United Kingdom all you have to do is look through history. A coronation is steeped in history, and what it does is open a wound for Ireland, for Scotland, who we know the shadow of a referendum hangs over them because they want to be emancipated from England. To have this ceremony where things like the Gold State coach, it has cherubs on the top that are meant to represent England, Scotland, and Wales. The stone of destiny is literally embedded under the coronation chair because it was stolen from Celtic Scots. So when they watch this, like the South Africans, like the Indians, they're triggered by imagery that reminds them of the conquest of empire, who they were the victims of, and their ancestors were the victims of. So spending money from the national expenses to celebrate someone who's profited from the pain of your ancestors and their death as well is not something that's going to resonate with them well. And again, we live in a time where people really enjoy letting their feelings be known publicly because the language of social media gives them a microphone that's louder than anyone else. You'd feel it. On today, you would feel it. But it's something I know that the firm and the people organizing the coronation were expecting. All you can hope is that the cheers kind of drown out the sound of the boos and you plow forward with a stiff upper lip.
All right, but because in the pictures we're seeing there, we're still seeing the yellow banners still being hoisted up and still protesters with placards
right
still
there.
insisting that not my king. How will King Charles, okay, this is saying not my king, the other one is saying abolish the monarchy.
Yeah.
You see all these and you know that he has a fight in his hands to try to simmer the tensions brewing around the world. When you look at the enormity of the task and how he's prepared all his life for this role, talk to us about it. How do you think he would approach this? Some would say maybe those that want to leave should be given the opportunity to leave, understanding that we are in a democratic era where people can actually decide their own fates, or as against trying to keep the Commonwealth of states all together.
What would have to happen, and I hope would happen, but again, reality will prove what is indeed going to be the history for Great Britain, is engage honestly and candidly, because I hope that King Charles III will learn from his predecessors of the same name. King Charles I was famously a king who believed in the divine right of kings. Within the first 4 years of his reign, he dissolved Parliament. He clashed with a formidable adversary in Oliver Cromwell. His battles that drove the country into debt, his decisions, his favor of the Duke of Buckingham against better advice, are what led to his being tried for treason and then being beheaded. So what Charles needs to do is look to what the eras of before, when this issue of republic led to a headless king, and say that in a modern time where people are even more unforgiving, if I do what he did, which was revert back to the security of the position I believe was given to me by God, it will only fuel the rage and the motivation to find change by force. So he needs to engage, have a conversation. When Republic says they want a republic, ask why. What would it look like? Because then you have to understand what the members of these groups don't realize is the truth of what Britain is, and we've seen it with Brexit. For all the things you say that are great, that is stuff that has been sewn into your mind and the identity you have by history, and that history is imbricated in conquest and empire. That's what made it great. But now that you say you want a republic, there's a reason why Oliver Cromwell's republic failed, because it doesn't work. The key is Britain needs to be sewn to Scotland and Wales and Ireland, because the unity of those different peoples provide it with a robustness that the rest of the world can respect. the United Kingdom is not a big island. When you look at the size of Africa and China and Australia and Russia, they dwarf the size of the United Kingdom. But because their attitude is so big and the perception of identity is so big, they're led to the misguided notion that they are so big. You are big through the alliances you have, and if you play fast and loose with them, the kingdom will fall.
Indeed, and of course, that historical division might linger on when we haven't seen efforts to address some of the issues you've just talking about, Judita. Okay, we're still live in London. Of course,
yes,
we can see the grounds of Buckingham Palace. The King and Queen are inside with their families, and of course, people are still milling about. Despite the fact that a greater percentage of the ceremony has been...
Officially, the ceremony is over.
Is over.
Officially, the ceremony is over.
Is over, and people are still, still in the mood and, being part of history in the...
I'm sure people will be taking their turns and trying to see how they can actually probably get to the front of the Buckingham Palace to take pictures and decide to just soak in the moment, like we've been saying.
Indeed.
Because today is one of those where were you kind of days when this happened.
When this happened, indeed. The coronation of King Charles III. And here on Arise News, I'm Ni Uilo.
I'm Aaron Akejala from our entire team here in Lagos, Abuja, and London. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.
Thanks for being there.